I'm gonna ask you some questions about your career. Is that okay?
Sure, of course.
So, for the people who don't know, Mike is a game developer. He has been in the field for more than 10 years.
I would say probably 15 years, almost 20.
20 years. Wow, how old are you? Don't answer that. So let me begin with the questionnaire. Is that okay?
Sure.
Can you tell me why do you do games? I know this question but why?
Why do I make games? So I started making games when I was in middle school. I guess they had those little calculators, the Texas Instruments ones. I did a video about that with the Texas Instruments calculators, and I made a bunch of games for them. And it's like asking why does someone make art. Essentially at the end of the day, I want to make people happy. I want to give people a good experience. This world is kind of miserable. I know you told me not to be too negative, but there's a lot of unpleasant stuff. The news is really unpleasant. When you look at stuff that's going on, there's war, there's plagues.
You want people to have a great time with your games.
Right, exactly. So, it seemed like it was worth spending time working on making stuff that is a positive thing, something that you can spend some time on and get a rewarding experience from.
Great, thank you. And how do you came up with an idea?
So there's a lot of ways that happens. A lot of my best projects come from taking a game that exists and then adding something to it or changing it. So for example, I did a game Strategery 2012, which was based on one of my favorite games, Advance Wars. And so I sort of made a copy of Advance Wars, and then I said, wait, there's no reason to do the same thing as has been done before, so I then added this political leaning to it where each character was a famous politician.
Cool.
And then they were, instead of having a fight about blowing people up, they were having political fights about, this tax is too high or whatever, that kind of stuff. So I...
like a debate.
Yeah, actually, the combat is called talking head mode. So you've got two people appearing on TV, and then whoever delivers the most impressive soundbite is the one who's the winner.
So the person who's playing makes the dialogue?
So no, the dialogue is picked from actual clips of actual politicians, things that they've said. And then what happens is, based on how you move your pieces around, the stronger they are based on their positioning in the game, the stronger of a quote it picks from the list.
That's so interesting.
So, yeah, I took something that exists and I added something to it. That's what I like to do with a lot of projects. For example, for Matchy Star, which is the most recent game that I'm doing, that game is based on Match 3s, which is sort of like Candy Crush or Bejeweled or those sorts of things. But instead of just doing another one of those that's the same, I said, why can't I have these little ships that float around and collect the matches? So it's sort of taking an idea that exists and then adding another layer to it is kind of the way that works.
Oh, interesting. Wow.
And then, so for example, on sort of a project that I'm working on the side that's kind of, I don't know whether it's ever going to work, but I'm trying to come up with something that's totally original, that's sort of more out there, that's based on some of my abstract art, and that it involves making kind of moving images out of these pieces of art that I've done. And those kinds of games are tougher to work on. If you're a newcomer to the game developer world, I don't recommend starting there because it's just a lot to kind of try and come up with a whole process. I gotta take the art, put it in the game, animate it, make a story out of it, make it into that's just a lot to do something completely original. I guess you could also say 100 Bullets is a much more original idea.
That's your game?
That was one of my games,
okay.
Yeah. That's a very difficult... It was difficult to come up with that idea.
What type of game is it?
It's a shoot 'em up, and you dodge your own bullets. So you're in a ring, so instead of shooting a bunch of bad guys, your bullets go out and they bounce back at you, And since you control the bullet pattern, you have to kind of move in a special way to kind of avoid your own bullets.
Interesting.
And that took me many years. I came up with the first version of that in 2009. And I just sort of was thinking, well, now if you shoot at a bullet in a circle, will it come back at you? And that was just sort of a really basic concept that I had. And then it took me, probably about 9 years before I came up with how to make it all into a complete experience.
Oh. Okay, tell me, Michael. Do you make all parts of the game?
So, no, and I don't recommend that you do that. Some games I do more of them than others. For example, 100 Bullets was closer to mostly my stuff, although even then I still had an artist who helped me do some graphic design and some visual design. Part of being a game developer is knowing what your strengths are and what your weaknesses are. And it really isn't that difficult to find someone who can fill in the gaps for you. Designing the look of the art was really a lot of trouble for me at the beginning. I've now practiced a lot with art, so I'm a lot better at art. But when I started out, I wasn't so great at doing visual design. And just hiring someone to just kind of come in and put a lick of paint on it and just make everything look professional, I recommend that. And it's not super expensive. There are a lot of artists who are really looking to work on a game, so they'll give you a good price in terms of getting work done.
Okay, Michael, so do you have to invest a lot of money in making games?
Right, yeah, so that gets to that, is that the biggest investment that I've made is just paying for myself to work on the games, because, you have to pay your own living expenses if you're going to work on a game. So that's the big kind of meatball, so to speak, of the funding that I've put out there. Also, I hire sound designers, I hire artists, I hire sound musicians. For example, I hire people to do trailers and to do box art, like the feature art, the art images. And hiring those people is usually not super expensive, but if you're expecting to make a game for free, you're probably not going to turn out a game that's particularly good. Mostly because, even if you're working on it, you have to get paid, right?
Yeah.
If you're sitting there and you're going to put in 2 hours a day, let's say 2 hours a day, that time is time that you're paying for. You could be doing something else. Mm-hmm. Every hour you spend on it, you could be spending going to a movie or cooking or cleaning your house or whatever. So no matter what, you're going to have to spend.
Great. So how much does it cost, talking about that, to make a game?
Well, so it depends on how much you want to pay your own time, how much you want to pay for people's time. But for example,
like for 100 Bullets, how much do you pay to get that game and finalized?
Right, yeah, so that was about, I would say, 9 months to a year's worth of work to make that game. So it's, you've got to pay, think about how much a salary is and how much, working basically full-time for a year on a game. That's how much you pay. And then with something like, $10,000 in freelancers, so like artists, musicians, sound designers, trailer, box art.
It is an investment.
Oh yeah, it is an investment.
Oh wow. So tell me, have you ever thought in giving up?
Yeah, every so often I have dark moments where I just feel miserable. And I've been working on this for 20 years, and I haven't still had like a major hit that was financially a big success.
But you have 2 games and Xbox.
I have 2 Xbox games. I've had games that were featured by Newgrounds. I've had games that were featured by Apple. Mm-hmm. I've had games that were in the IGF, or one game that was in the IGF, which is the Independent Game Festival, which is, I don't know.
Indie.
Indie. We're the indie people. I've had one of those, and I would still say I'm not super successful. Even though,
You're going there.
I don't feel very successful.
Okay, Michael. So
So sometimes I give up. Sometimes I think, how I've worked so hard. I've worked for years. I've worked for like 20 years. And I just think, okay, well, maybe I should just become a lawyer or something.
You can do it. How good do you think is the market for games? Selling games?
I think that in terms of the amount of people who are buying games nowadays, there have never been more people buying games than there are today. The problem is that most of the customers are locked into kind of big budget, big box games like something like Fortnite or a lot of the roguelikes. I don't even know what the latest roguelike is. I guess what was Hades was a big one. But there are a lot of kind of big games that kind of dominate the market. So if for a small creator who tries to do stuff that's different, it's difficult. In some ways, it's better than it used to be because back in like 2009 or 2008, you couldn't even get on Steam. Like Steam wouldn't even let you on their platform unless you were one of the cool kids, right? So Steam wouldn't even let you on. Now, the way Steam does it is that they let you on the platform, but they sort of kind of put you in the back so that you're not as visible as some of the bigger launches.
So you pay to be in Steam?
You only pay a nominal fee of like $100 to be on Steam.
Okay.
And then they kind of give you a little bit of visibility for just a couple of days, and then they sort of kind of stuff you aside.
So what is Steam for people who doesn't know what Steam is?
So Steam is one of the big PC gaming platforms, and they're really aggressive about kind of controlling the market. And they're kind of the biggest platform for PC games. So if you're buying an indie game on PC, you're probably buying it on Steam. There are some other platforms like itch.io and Epic Game Store, and also Microsoft has its own store that is the Microsoft that you go when you search for Windows and you say like Microsoft Store. That's another option. But the fact is that Steam is really kind of the market leader. And unfortunately, their algorithm is very opaque. It's very difficult to know what is going to be seen.
Break the system, Michael.
Right. Well, that's why sometimes I feel like giving up, and sometimes I feel like we're gonna break the system. We're gonna be.
That's the new revolution.
We're gonna do a revolution.
So, Michael, who inspired you to be a game developer?
Well, it wasn't so much as a who, as much as just when I was a kid, I played a lot of games, and I thought, I would like to make this kind of stuff. One of my biggest motivators ever was Sid Meier. I actually did an internship at his game company called Firaxis Games, and I had always played the Civilization games. I loved them, and it was just like an amazing experience to sit there and work at the actual studio that makes the games. And I just thought, this is kind of making something that's fun for real. So I always wanted to do that, and then it sort of, as soon as I got a taste of it, I was sort of, well, I gotta keep doing this.
It's like the dream of Luffy. I want to be the king of the pirate. You want to be a king of the...
Right, yeah, exactly. That was, when I was younger, I said, I want to make games that change the industry. I really wanted to make games.
You want to be the king of games.
I wanted to be the king of games. I wanted to make games that were different, games that like create new trends, games that kind of move the needle of what it means to make a game further.
Like the Pokemon one.
Yes, like Pokemon. That's exactly.
Even people die because of that.
But I don't really want to kill people as a result of the games.
Okay, so where did you learn?
So most of my training was in computer science. I started off when I was in high school. I took some classes at the University of Delaware in computer science, and then I went undergrad at the University of Rochester, where I learned math and computer science. And that was really learning the code end and the technical end of things. And then in terms of learning the art, I've kind of taught myself. One of the things that I really recommend to people who are trying to get better at art is to just spend some time doing some art just every day. Just spend 10, 15, even a half hour every day just doing a little piece of art. And that actually will get you a better degree than most MFA programs.
That's a fact.
That'll teach you more than getting an expensive MFA degree somewhere. That's for sure.
So, is it hard to code?
For me, it's not. But you should think there are a lot of game designers who don't do as much coding, or they'll use templates or pre-written code. So one of the things I'd like to make clear is that as much as I'm very serious about, I do very complicated algorithms and sophisticated code, you don't have to be a coder to be a really good game designer. First of all, there are games that are just board games that don't have any code at all. So, like Lily and I have been playing Carcassonne, which is a really nice game, and you don't have to write a lot of code to make that. Like, if you wanted to prototype that, you could print up little pieces of paper and put them together and make prototypes and, do that. But yeah, for me, coding is kind of the easy part. So I try and focus on ideas that are based on technical, interesting stuff. But, that's not for everyone. There are some people who are going to be really good at doing art. Like, they can do a background for a game that's just a beautiful landscape that's just wonderful. Then make your game about that.
Can you give me just an example of what type of code programs you use to make games?
So, there's a lot of programs. Obviously, Unity is the main game development tool, which is a game engine. And then Unity reads scripts that are written in C#, which is a computer programming language. And the C# code is usually written in Microsoft Visual Studio.
Oh, wow.
And then that's sort of the basics of it. There's also, sometimes I use PHP Storm, which is more for web development. So when I do, like, if you've played my game eggfun.io, that plays in your browser, and so that doesn't use Unity, that uses its own thing. There's a lot of tools, but really, it's not really about the tools. It's sort of, you'll find the tools you need if you're having a good idea, a good concept that you're working on will drive you to find the right tool.
It will be good if you can do future videos explaining how you code some games.
Yeah,
that would be great, because if these videos are focused for people who wants to be gamers, that would be great.
Yeah, I'll be happy to zoom in on how to code specific things or do little code tutorials for specific ideas. That would be great.
Perfect. Just to end the interview, what advice would you give to the future generations of game developers?
I have a bunch of points that I would make.
So make it short.
First of all, try not to get wrapped up in sort of the game. There are a lot of people who are very competitive and there's like groups of people who work together, and there's, why aren't they covering my game? Why aren't they doing this? The best work that I've done has been just me working independently on my own stuff that I wanted to make without thinking about, is this group of developers going to like it? Is that group of developers going to like it? Get that out of your head, because it's very tempting to just think, this game designer Joe or whatever is super famous, so I want them to like my game. And just avoiding that is really helpful. I also think that doing creative work every day, doing something, you want to do something creative every day. So if you could do a drawing or a poem or do a little dance or something, I don't know, whatever you're interested in.
That is a great advice, Michael. And I congratulate you for all your efforts and thank you for inspiring new generations. Draco say yay!
I've appeased the dragon, so that's alright, that's a good thing. Alright, thank you everyone.